Well, good morning again, friends. It's good to be here with you. And I am so glad that you are here. And I'm glad that Reverend Tim and his wife, Carol, are here with us too. And maybe, no, Carissa's not here. I did ask. I was hoping maybe Carissa would be here. She's been with us and she will be back again. But Reverend Tim and Carol, for anyone who hasn't yet met you, would you all please identify yourselves so that people can see and welcome you and perhaps find you after the service and say hello? We are so glad you both are with us here at UUCville. Our congregation's ministry theme for August, embodiment, has actually been a great way for all of us to begin to get to know Reverend Tim. In his sermons this month, which if you missed any of them, you'll be able to watch them on our webpage as soon as they're uploaded, he has explored our monthly ministry theme beautifully. He shared his ideas of all of us together embodying ministry and the power of embodying radical welcome, which I hope, Tim and Carol, that you have felt radical welcome from us. We want to offer it. We want to offer this radical hospitality to everyone who walks through our doors. In last week's sermon, Reverend Tim emphasized the idea of each of us making the time to embody rest. He talked about the importance of taking intentional time to restore our souls. As summer draws to a close, if you have not yet been able to take some time for rest or for play, I hope that you will. Deep rest is something that we all need. And as Reverend Tim said so eloquently last week, it is only a rested heart and a nourished soul that can mend a broken world. So on that note, I offer gratitude for my recent 2-week study leave where I was able to take some time to read and to reflect and to renew and to rest. And I am delighted to share a little bit with you this morning about my time away. So I invite you, if you will, to embody curiosity as I do. And here's how I would like you to do this. At certain points in my sermon, I will indicate that I want you as a congregation to ask me the question, and then what happened? Such a good question to ask someone or to even ask yourself when you're wanting to hear more of the story. So let's practice. I'll indicate to you, and you'll say back to me, that's right, excellent. And those of you on Zoom, you can do this at home too. You can just ask it to the screen or you can type the question in the chat. So first, let's remind ourselves what we might mean by embodiment. I already offered several examples from Reverend Tim's sermons this month, embodying ministry together, embodying radical welcome and hospitality, and embodying rest. We've experienced embodiment in our worship together today with our singing and with Leah Morris's body prayer and our own time in meditation and reflection and prayer. In listening, in seeing and in hearing and in moving, embodiment is about not just staying in the intellectual thinking parts of our existence, which is so easy and comfortable and safe for so many of us. Anybody who can relate to that? So many of us, that intellectual safe space. And yet, it is also so limited and so limiting. Embodiment is about being alive and engaged through our thinking minds and also our hearts and our spirits and our senses. Embodiment is about weaving together our mind and our body and our spirit. It's where our words come together with our actions. Embodiment is living into a quality or a way of being, such as embodying wisdom or embodying grace or embodying rest. And yes, there is also the embodiment of greed and hate and other less positive qualities. We all know that embodiment isn't all rainbows and unicorns. We have feelings about and we embody frustration, disappointment, fear, and pain, among many other things too. So while I was on study leave this month, I wanted to spend time continuing to reflect on the characteristics and qualities of embodiment, on the weaving together of the mind and the body and the spirit, and how it relates to the ministry theme we explored last month, which was presence. There's so much to think about within these ministry themes. I packed my suitcase, and Karen, my wife, packed her bicycle and her panniers, which is a fancy way of saying she packed her bags that hang over the rear wheels of her bicycle, and we headed north in our car. Karen for an 11-day bicycling trip through the Adirondacks, and me to an Airbnb on the New York-Vermont border with our 2 dogs, Maggie and Lucky, for some study leave. Oh, thanks for asking. Well, we arrived, and I got Karen launched with her trip leader and her bicycling cohort, and I proceeded to plan out my time. You know, I wanted to use it really wisely, to squeeze every drop out of it that I could. I didn't want to waste a minute. No, sir, I had a list. I had books, count them, books to read. I had planning for the upcoming church year to do, tasks to accomplish, writing, calendaring, not a moment to spare. Well, as many of you know, I grew up in Texas, and I've lived in hot and humid Virginia even longer than I lived in the heat of Texas. And honestly, I didn't even think to inquire at the Airbnb when I made reservations if they had air conditioning, because I just assumed they did, because everybody does, right? But you know what they say about making assumptions. And unfortunately, it seems we had brought the heat and humidity of Virginia with us to upstate New York, and it was, well, miserable, because the Airbnb did have a small window unit in the bedroom, but that was it. And the rest of the house was unair conditioned. So the dogs and I were so hot and so uncomfortable. It was 87 degrees inside the house. Well, I had to pivot. I had to let go of expectations. I had to realize that the list of what I wanted to accomplish during my leave had actually been unrealistic from the get-go, with air conditioning or not. In making my original plans, I hadn't really made time to reflect on what was in the reading and the studying that I was doing. So I had to stop. I had to pause. I had to embody flexibility. I had to offer the situation and myself grace. Fortunately, the hot weather didn't last more than a few days, and by the time the first cool evening rolled around, I was able to shift to a different way of being and create a more spacious plan. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Have you ever traveled by yourself with dogs? Well, come to think of it, this was my first time. Now, I love our dogs, Maggie and Lucky. Many of you have met them before, and they sometimes come to church with me and are in my office during the week. They love coming to church. They love people. They don't like to be alone. And when Karen and I had planned this trip, I was all thumbs up about bringing the dogs and having them stay with me while Karen rode her bike. Sure, it'll be great. I'll read and reflect in the mornings after I take the dogs for a walk, and then in the afternoons, I'll go to museums or other thought-provoking places, and I'll leave the dogs all comfy at the Airbnb, no problem. And it would have been no problem, except that the owners of the Airbnb actually lived upstairs on the second and third floors of the house. And the house, as it turns out, was not on the quiet road that I'd imagined. And what dog doesn't feel the need to bark at large trucks that go by frequently? So on the first afternoon that I left the dogs at the house and I went into town, I asked the hosts when I returned, how had things gone? then it was clear that Maggie and Lucky had barked a lot. Well, I had to pivot. I had to let go of expectations. I had to realize that what I thought was going to be the way things were going to work wasn't the way things were going to work. So I had to pause, and I had to embody flexibility. I had to offer the situation and myself and Maggie and Lucky grace. Honestly, I was a little grumpy at first, and I offered myself compassion about that. The truth is that I valued having a meaningful time of study leave, and I valued being a good guest and taking care of Lucky and Maggie, who were in a new and an unfamiliar environment. So I had to come up with a new plan for study and rest and renewal, and I needed to address those other values too. So I worked through it, and I was able to shift to a different way and create a new, more dog-inclusive plan for my afternoons. Well, after I let go and I changed my mindset, it was good. There were just certain things that I couldn't do with the dogs in tow. But there were other things that I could do that I might not have done if they hadn't been with me. I let myself embody what was happening and not hold on to the disappointment and anger. I didn't say I didn't feel those things. I just didn't hold on to them. And I went on lots more hikes, and I was fortunate to spend time in Vermont's soul-nourishing beauty. One hike offered the perfect example of healing powers that can be found in embodiment. There's a place called the Mile Around Woods, and on a placard there, it tells the story of a man, Trenor Park, who grew up in North Bennington. In the 1850s, he went to California to work, and when he returned to Vermont, he was, by his own estimation, in poor mental health. The story goes that in 1865, he laid a path out through the woods, a mile around, and walked it daily, which he credited with helping his healing. So Maggie and Lucky and I walked the Mile Around Woods, and I could easily see how this lovely place would help anyone embody healing through restoration of body, mind, and spirit. Well, what happened is that I got into a daily rhythm that included reading and reflection and writing and studying and adventure. After my study times in the mornings, I made the commitment to take the dogs and myself on at least one adventure a day. An adventure that would be fun for all of us, full of beauty, and help me feel renewed. And sometimes this included pie. Mostly, it involved slowing down, paying attention to the beauty around me, and letting myself feel deeply. Some of you know that walking the labyrinth is one of my spiritual practices, and I'm so grateful that our congregation has 4 different labyrinths that are part of our labyrinth ministry. When I'm traveling, I always make a point to consult the online worldwide labyrinth locator so that I can visit labyrinths in other communities. For those of you who don't know, a labyrinth is different from a maze. It doesn't have any dead ends or false paths. It's unicursal, or one path that leads into the center, and then the same path leads you back out. It was lovely to hear Reverend Tim speak last week about the meandering way and how it helps him to slow down. This is how I experience the labyrinth. Its meandering path helps me remember to slow down. So imagine my surprise and my sense of peace and ease when I made my way to a sweet little park not far from where I was staying to visit this lovely, lovingly cared for labyrinth with a sign next to it saying, "Slow way down." It was just the message I needed to hear, the message I needed to remember, and the message I needed to embody. You're getting really good at that. Well, what happened next is I came home to you. I came home grateful to be here with you together and ready to engage on the next part of our journey together on life's meandering path, with the prayer that we will all be able to show up as our whole selves, our complete selves, our imperfect selves, our embodied selves in each moment, with all the messiness that it means to be human. As I reflect on my time away and what I want to share with you, I want to make sure you know and that you take in that we have all had to learn, especially in the past 2 years, how to pivot, how to let go of expectations. We've also had to realize that what we thought was going to work the way we thought it was going to work didn't necessarily work that way. So we've had to pause. We've had to embody flexibility. We've had to offer situations and each other and ourselves grace. And this is a spiritual practice. And the truth is that pausing and offering ourselves and each other grace is what we're going to have to keep doing in order to keep going on. In many ways, we've gotten better at it. We've gotten better at this flexibility, this practice in pivoting, but that doesn't mean that it's easier. So no matter what you are personally experiencing right now, a new routine with the start of school or car trouble or a health challenge for yourself or someone you care about, or the realities of trying to make things work with a budget that's just too tight, or maybe a change at your work, or maybe you're looking for paid employment, or you're really, really struggling with a relationship that's broken or needs repair, or you've had the death of someone you love, or you're just working with your own experience of the season as it begins to shift. Whatever you are experiencing, no matter how big or small, no matter the challenge or the joy, may we be here to offer support for each other. And may we embody for ourselves and one another the abiding love and grace that surrounds us and sustains us and helps us go forth in the world to shine our light and to do our part. May love be our guide. And then we sang our closing hymn.